Okay, so this is the Gemara, Daf Yomi. We're in Daf 42. So, at the end of 41, it says the Gemara raises an objection, another objection, and it is so that an uncertainty does. It's asking a question, and is it so that an uncertainty does not override a certainty? But isn't it taught in a Braita that Rabbi Yehuda said there was an incident involving a maidservant? Now we're in 42 of one violent person in the city of Rimon, who cast a non-viable newborn into a pit, and a priest came and looked into the pit to ascertain whether the baby was male or whether female. As a length of time of a woman's ritual impurity after childbirth, even if she gave birth to a non-viable newborn, depends on whether the child was male or female. So that's Leviticus chapter 12. So the incident came before the sages to rule whether or not the priest had contracted ritual impurity while standing over the corpse, and they deemed him ritually pure. The basis for this ruling was due to the fact that as martens and polecats are common there, it is likely that the body was dragged away before the priest arrived at the pit. The Gemara concludes its objection here in this case, where it is certain that the woman cast the non-viable newborn into the pit, and it is uncertain whether the animal dragged it away, and it is uncertain whether no animal dragged it away. The sages nevertheless ruled that an uncertainty comes and overrides a certainty. So the Gemara rejects this interpretation of the Braita. Do not say that the woman certainly cast a non-viable newborn into a pit. Rather say that she cast an object similar to a non-viable newborn into a pit. Perhaps it was not the body of an infant. It might have merely been congealed blood, which does not impart impurity. Therefore, it is a conflict between uncertainty and uncertainty. It is unclear whether the item that was cast in the pit could have rendered the priest ritually impure, and even if it could have, it might have already been dragged away. So this is, Okay, so the Gemara asks, but isn't it taught in the Braita to ascertain whether it was male or whether it was female, indicating that the only uncertainty was with regard to its gender, as it was generally a non-viable newborn. So the Gemara answers that this is what the Braita is saying. The priest attempted to examine two aspects of the miscarried baby, and he sought to ascertain whether the woman miscarried, bearing an amorphous mass, and whether she cast a non-viable newborn into the pit. And if you say that she cast a non-viable newborn, she sought to ascertain whether it was male or whether it was female. And if you wish, say that there is a different answer. This case is not a conflict between certainty and uncertainty, rather is a conflict between certainty and certainty. Since martens and polecats are common there, they certainly drag the body away. Consequently, the ruling in this case does not contradict the principle that an uncertainty does not override a certainty. The Gemara returns to the dispute with regard to an idol that broke. So Rabbi Yochanan raised an objection to the opinion of Reish Lakish from the Mishnah. If one found an object in the figure of a hand or in the figure of a foot, these are forbidden as objects similar to those are worshipped. So Rabbi Yochanan asked, and why are they forbidden? Aren't they fragments which, according to Reish Lakish, should be permitted? The Gemara answers, didn't Shmuel interpret the Mishnah as referring to a case where these objects are standing on their pedestals, which shows that they were designated this way initially? So Rabbi Yochanan raised another objection to the opinion of Reish Lakish from the Mishnah. A Gentile can revoke the idolatrous status of his own object of idol worship or that of another Gentile, but a Jew cannot revoke the status of a Gentile's object of idol worship. So Rabbi Yochanan says, why can't a Jew revoke the status of a Gentile's idol according to Reish Lakish? Let it be treated like an object of idol worship that broke on its own, which Reish Lakish deemed permitted. Abai said that Mishnah is referring to a case where the Jew bent the idol out of shape without actually breaking it. And the Gemara asking, if he merely bent the idol out of shape, what of it? But didn't we learn in the Mishnah that if one bent an idol, changing its shape, even if he did not remove any part of it, he thereby revoked its status as an object of idol worship? The Gemara answers, this statement applies only in a case where a Gentile bent the idol, changing its shape, and in a case where a Jew bent it, caused changing its shape, its status as an object of idol worship is not revoked. So, in Rava said a different answer. Actually, the basic halacha is that in a case where a Jew bent it, changing its shape, its status as an object of idol worship is also revoked. But the sages issued a decree that such an idol remains in its idolatrous status. So, lest a Jew first lift it up and then attempt to revoke its status, In this case, the idol's status is not revoked, as when a Jew lifts an idol, he acquires it, and it becomes an object of idol worship in a Jew's possession. And any object of idol worship in a Jew's possession can never have its idolatrous status revoked. Therefore, only when an idol breaks on its own does Reish Lakish maintain that its status is revoked. So Rabbi Yochanan raised another objection to the opinion of Reish Lakish from a Braita. In a case of a Gentile who brought stones from stone heaps that were used in the worship of the deity Hamarkulus, so Mercury, and who then paved roads and built theaters with them, it is permitted to derive benefit from them as the Gentile revoked their idolatrous status. But in the case of a Jew who brought stones that were used in the worship of Mercury, who then paved roads and built theaters with them, it is prohibited to derive benefit from them. So Rabbi Yochanan asked, according to Reish Lakish, why does a stone such as this maintain its idolatrous status? Let it be treated like an object of idol worship that broke on its own, which Reish Lakish deems permitted. The Gemara answers here too. Rabbi Yochanan's question may be answered in accordance with the opinion of Rava, that the sages issued a decree that an object of idol worship maintains its idolatrous status when a Jew attempts to revoke it, lest the Jew lift and acquire the idol, which would make it impossible to subsequently revoke its status. So Rabbi Yochanan raised another objection to the opinion of Reish Lakish from a Braita. In the case of a Gentile who shaved down an object of idol worship for his own sake, as he needed the shavings, the idol itself and its shavings are then permitted. If he did it for the sake of the idol, to improve its appearance, the idol is forbidden, but its shavings are permitted. But in the case of a Jew who shaved down an object of idol worship, whether he did it for his own sake or for the sake of the idol itself and its shavings are forbidden. So Rabbi Yochanan asked, according to Reish Lakish, in a case where a Jew shaved the idol for his own sake, why are the shavings forbidden? Lest it be treated like an object of idol worship that broke on its own. The Gemara answers here too. Rabbi Yochanan's question may be answered in accordance with the opinion of Rava, that the sages issued a decree that an object of idol worship maintains its idolatrous status when a Jew attempts to cause it to be revoked. So Rabbi Yochanan raised another objection to the opinion of Reish Lakish from a Mishnah. So Rabbi Yoshi says, when one encounters an idol, he should grind the idol and throw the dust to the wind, or cast it to the sea. The rabbi said to him, what is the good of that? That also gives a Jew benefit from the idol, as it becomes fertilizer for his crops, and deriving any kind of benefit is prohibited, as it is written, quote, in nothing of the prescribed item shall cleave to your hand, Deuteronomy 13:18. So Rabbi Yochanan asked, according to Reish Lakish, why is this prohibited? Let it be treated like an object of idol worship that broke on its own. The Gemara answers here too. Rabbi Yochanan's question may be answered in accordance with the opinion of Rava cited above, as that the sages issued a decree with regard to this matter. Rabbi Yochanan raised another objection to the opinion of Reish Lakish from a Braita. So Rabbi Yoshi ben Rabbi Yoshi ben what is this? Yasion says, if one found an object in the figure of a dragon with its head severed, but it is uncertain whether a Gentile severed it, it is uncertain whether a Jew severed it, the object is permitted. But if it is certain that a Jew severed it, it is forbidden. So Rabbi Yochanan asked, according to Reish Lakish, why is it forbidden? Let it be treated like an object of idol worship that broke on its own. The Gemara answers here too. Rabbi Yochanan's question may be answered in accordance with the opinion of Rava, that the sages issued a decree with regard to this matter. So Rabbi Yochanan raised another objection to the opinion of Reish Lakish from a Braita. Rabbi Yoshi says that one may not even plant vegetables in the rainy season under a tree worshipped as an idol, as foliage may fall on them, serving as fertilizer. So Rabbi Yochanan asked, according to Reish Lakish, why should a leaf from such a tree retain its idolatrous status? Let it be treated like an object of idol worship that broke on its own. The Gemara answers, there it is different, as the main object of idol worship, the tree, still exists, fully intact. The Gemara asks, but consider the case of shavings where the main object of idol worship still exists, and nevertheless it is taught in Braita, cited earlier, that if a Gentile shaved an idol down for its own sake, the idol is forbidden, but its shavings are permitted. So here too, in the case of the fallen leaves of a tree that is worshipped as an idol, it should be permitted to derive benefit from them. So Rav Huna, son of Rav Yehoshua, says, the reason the leaves are not permitted is because the status of an object of idol worship cannot be revoked by its natural manner of growth. Since the falling of leaves is a natural phenomenon, their detachment from the tree does affect a revocation of their status as objects of idol worship. So Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish raised an objection to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan from the Mishnah, so Elah 13b, with regard to a bird's nest at the top of a tree that belongs to the temple treasury. One may not derive benefit from it ab initio, but if one derive benefit from it, he is not liable for misuse of property consecrated to the temple. With regard to a nest that is at the top of a tree used as part of idolatrous rites, so an asherah, although one may not climb the tree, as that would be benefiting from an object of idol worship, he may knock the nest off with a pole and benefit from it by using it for firewood and the like. In analyzing this baraita, it enters your mind that this is referring to a case where the bird broke off branches from the worship tree and built a nest with them, and yet the baraita teaches that one may knock the nest off with a pole, and it is then permitted to derive benefit from it. So apparently the forbidden branches used in the construction of the nest lost their idolatrous status without human involvement, and in accordance with the opinion of Reish Lakish that an object that breaks loses its status. The Gemara explains, here we are dealing with a case where the bird brought branches from elsewhere and built a nest with them on top of the worship tree. The branches were never part of an object of idol worship. The Gemara comments, the language in the Mishnah is also precise if read with this understanding, as it teaches with regard to a nest in a consecrated tree. One may not derive benefit from it ab initio, but if one derive benefit from it, he is not liable for misuse of consecrated property. Granted, if you say that the bird brought branches from elsewhere, this explanation is consistent with that which the Mishnah teaches with regard to a nest in a consecrated tree, namely that one may not derive benefit from it, but if one derive benefit from it, he is not liable for misuse of consecrated property. According to this understanding of the Mishnah, one may not derive benefit from the nest by rabbinic law, but if one derive benefit from it, he is not liable for misusing consecrated property by Torah law, as the branches are not consecrated, but were brought from elsewhere. But if you say that the bird broke off branches from the tree itself and built a nest with them, why is it taught that one who derives benefit from it is not liable for misuse of consecrated property? Aren't the branches consecrated? Evidently, the Mishnah is referring to a nest that was built with the branches from other trees in accordance with Rabbi Yochanan's understanding that an object of idol worship that broke on its own is still forbidden. The Gemara responds to this proof for Rabbi Yochanan's understanding of the Mishnah. Does this argument prove anything? The Mishnah can still be interpreted as referring to a case where the branches for the nest came from the tree itself, and here we are dealing with a case of growths that came afterward, that is, branches that grew after the tree was consecrated. And the Tana of the Mishnah holds that there is no prohibition against the misuse of consecrated property with regard to such growths. So another explanation in the Mishnah, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, is presented. Rabbi Abahu says that Rabbi Yochanan says, what does it mean that one may knock off the nest? It means that one may knock off the chicks, but one may not derive benefit from the nest itself. Rabbi Yaakov said to Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa, I will explain the Mishnah to you with regard to the chicks, which can fly away and are not confined to the tree, both here and there, that is, both in the case of a tree consecrated to the temple treasury and in the case of a tree used for idol worship. Deriving benefit from them is permitted. But with regard to the eggs, both here and there, in both cases, deriving benefit from them is prohibited, as they are not seen as independent of the tree. So Rav Ashi added to this and said, and chicks that still need their mother to survive are considered like eggs. Deriving benefit from them is prohibited. So the Mishnah now says, in the case of one who finds vessels and upon them is a figure of the sun, a figure of the moon, or a figure of a dragon, he must take them and cast them into the Dead Sea and not derive any benefit from them, as they are assumed to be objects of idol worship. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says those figures that are upon respectable vessels are forbidden. Those that are upon disgraceful vessels are permitted. So now the Gemara says, the Gemara asks with regard to the specific figures listed in the Mishnah, is this to say that people worship only these figures but not any other item? And the Gemara raises a contradiction between this list and that which is taught in another Mishnah, so Hulin 39b, with regard to one who slaughters an animal for the sake of the worship, to worship seas, for the sake of rivers, for the sake of the wilderness, for the sake of the sun, for the sake of the moon, for the sake of the stars and constellations, for the sake of Michael, the great ministering angel, or even for the sake of a small worm. In all these cases, the animal is forbidden, as these animals have the status of offerings to the dead. Abai said in response to the contradiction with regard to worship, people might worship any item that they find. With regard to fashioning figures and then worshiping them, only with regard to these three items listed in the Mishnah, which are important, do people fashion figures of them and worship them. With regard to figures of any other entity, people make them merely for ornamental purposes. So Rav Sheshet would consolidate the principles of the Braitot pertaining to this matter and teach. Figures of all constellations are permitted except for the following celestial objects: the sun and the moon. And figures of all faces are permitted except for the human face. And all figures of other items are permitted except for the figure of a dragon. So the master said, figures of all constellations are permitted except for the following celestial objects: the sun and the moon. The Gemara asks, what are we dealing with here? If we say that the reference is to one who forms these figures, if Rav Sheshet is discussing the issue of which figures it is permitted to form, is forming figures of all the other constellations permitted? So, but gods of gold you shall not make for yourself. It says, but isn't it written, quote, and you shall not make me gods of silver or gods of gold. You shall not make for you. Exodus 20:20. This verse interpreted to mean, you shall not make figures of my attendants who serve before me on high. So those celestial bodies, including the constellations that were created to serve God. So rather, it is obvious that this halakha is referring to a case where one finds vessels with these figures on them. And this is, as we learned in the Mishnah, in the case of one who finds vessels, and upon them is the figure of the sun, the figure of the moon, or a figure of a dragon, he must take them and cast them into the Dead Sea. This indicates that it is permitted to derive benefit from any other vessels that were found and that had figures on them. So the Gemara asks, if it is a case where one finds vessels with these figures on them, say the middle clause of Rav Sheshet's statement, figures of all faces are permitted except for the human face. Now, if it is a case where one finds vessels with figures on them, is a vessel with the figure of a human face forbidden? But didn't we learn in the Mishnah, in the case of one who finds vessels, and upon them is the figure of the sun, a figure of the moon, or a figure of a dragon, he must take them and cast them in the Dead Sea. This indicates that a vessel with the figure of a dragon is forbidden, but a vessel with the figure of a human face is not, because it's not mentioned, obviously, right? So rather, the Gemara concludes, it is obvious that the statement that the figure of a human face is forbidden is referring to a case where one forms a figure, and this is prohibited in accordance with the statement of Rav Huna, son of Rav Yehoshua, who states that the interpretation of the verse, quote, you shall not make with me gods of silver or gods of gold, you shall not make for you, Exodus 20:20, is, do not make of me, that is, do not form the figure of a person who created the image of God. So the Gemara asks, if it is referring to a case where one forms a figure, say the last clause of Rav Sheshet's statement, all figures are permitted except for the figure of a dragon. So if it is referring to a case where one forms a figure, is forming the figure of a dragon prohibited? But isn't it written, you shall not make with me gods of silver or gods of gold? And that is the end of dot 42. Thanks for watching.